Our moderator is Brian Schmidt. He is the Executive Director of Game SoundCon and is the recipient of the 2008 Game Audio Network Guild Lifetime Award. Did I get that right? Yeah. He's worked on over 130 games, and he's used his experience, combined experience in music composition and sound design, and a deep technical knowledge to change the landscape of the game audio industry. That's very well written. Joining Brian is Jay Weinland, who is the head of the sound department at Bungie Studios. He's a former high school orchestra teacher, which is very sweet, and he's been in the video games industry since 1996. He's listed here as an aficionado of science fiction novels, sports brass instruments, and beer with beef jerky. Excuse me.
Damn, you found that on the
website. They tell me what to say. And then joining them is let me see if I have this right. Penka Kouneva. Okay. She's a game and film composer of exquisite talent, apparently. And her credits include Prince of Persia, Forgotten Sands, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, World of Warcraft, StarCraft 2, Gears of War 2 and 3, The Sims 3, Diablo 3, and. She's won numerous awards, including the Sundance Composer Fellowship, 2 Ovation Awards, the Copland Award, the Hollywood Music Award, and so on. She works on the advisory board for the Game Developer Conference. The advisory board for the Game Developers Conference. She's a mentor for the Game Audio Network Guild and advisor for the Sundance Institute. Okay, I think that's plenty of me, so you guys take it away.
All right. Here we go. Before we get started, raise your hand if you are a game designer. Good. Game programmer? What does this mean? I didn't say shake your hand. So sorry, game programmer? Music composer or sound designer? I see lots of people with multiple hands going up. That's very interesting. We give a lot of these kinds of panels, but it's usually to other composers and sound designers, so it's really fun to be able to talk with people of the esteem and expertise. And
I saw mostly designers of the largest number of hands, which is great.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start with that question then. So we'll jump right in since we are short on time, and we will try to have some time for questions at the end. Since we have a room full of designers here, how many people have been to the Game Developers Conference? If you two could grab these people and forcibly drag them into 2 audio track sessions at GDC, what would they be and why? What do you think these people need to know about audio that they don't know right now?
First of all, I would encourage each one of you to attend GDC. It's a fantastic event. It's a learning event. It's a real community. And the one talk that the audio track puts on, which actually is not a talk, it's called Demo Derby. What happens in the course of 2 hours, young composers or composers of any level of experience play their demos, and a panel of 5 or 6 veteran composers and audio leaders makes commentaries. They suggest, they just make comment on the track, suggest ways of improvement, and this is how you meet aspiring, talented young composers, and then you make a connection right there at the conference, and the whole vibe is all about nurturing and networking and fostering relationships. So this is how you get exposed to the work of your peers. So Demo Derby at the Gang, on an audio track. And then the other talk I was thinking, something that has to do with resources or technology, maybe how you connect with freelance sound designers or freelance implementers, or a talk about the middleware tools that you can use to really create amazing audio. And I have to say something right away. The most important thing today in this incredibly oversaturated market is that your game stands out, that your game has something super memorable about it. Obviously the visuals, the game mechanics will be that, but also the sound and the whole entire sound experience has to be haunting and memorable and awesome. And this is what you want to stand apart and create a distinctive game.
Yeah, there's also a demo one for the sound designers too, in addition to the one she mentioned for composers. There's one for sound designers that's super useful. In a lot of ways, you can find some really talented people there. If you're a designer that needs a great sound designer, that's not a bad place to necessarily go and find, because people that are brave enough to get up at GDC and show their sound design in front of hundreds of people are usually have the chutzpah to be able to make some good stuff for your game. The other one, other ones which I should suggest, if you pick a game session of I hate to call them postmortems because that's not necessarily a terribly good name, but learning from the mistakes that people are willing to share is a key thing. Having made games for 20 years, I could have a litany. I could spend the next hour talking about the things we've done badly and how we could manage to do them better. And it's sometimes useful to learn from what other people have seen as impediments or things that have blocked them from being able to actually have successful game sound design or even successful design as a whole. I think those are useful lessons that we can all learn from what other people have learned in the trenches.
Do you have any particular lessons in mind? Like what went wrong maybe with some recent projects you've been working on, and how might they benefit from that experience?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I think the hardest thing we fight against as sound designers is when people are not necessarily willing to buy off on what their plan is going to be. So if you say, hey, this is the way we want the game to be, or this is the way we want the story to be, or this is what we want the weapons to be, or this is what we want the vehicles to be, everyone loves to have the full breadth of things that they can play with. Everyone wants to play with their toys till the very end, and that's the thing we fight against as audio people. So being able to have a cogent plan that you can come up with and stick with and own and commit to, those are the things that are going to help your audio team at the end of the line be able to actually make successful audio. Because the worst thing that can happen is when we've already finished something and you get towards the end and they're like, oh yeah, but we totally changed that thing, and it might be a great idea. What they've changed it to might be fantastic, but that's totally beside the point. The main point is that we made a plan and we had this plan committed to, and that doesn't happen. And it's happened on all games. Almost every game I've worked on has had some greater or lesser degrees of that, and that's starting with EA for FIFA, Need for Speed, and through the Halos and so on. People make decisions for good reasons and well-intended reasons, but there has to be a line in the sand that says, I will not change these decisions after this point, so that I can let the people that have to come after me be able to do their job as best they can without having the tables flipped. We like flip tables is a good thing when somebody goes. And unfortunately, audio is at the very end of the food chain. We all know it. And we're not the only ones. You know, effects are at the end of the food chain with us. In our group, Spec Ops is at the end of the food chain with us. And you cannot kill the people at the end of the food chain by changing your minds along the way as far as how you want to make things.
Yes, I guess I've sometimes seen a milestone, content complete, and people sometimes forget. Well, if the art is due on March 15th, and the sound is due on March 15th, but the sound can't be done until they see the art, that doesn't work so well.
We've actually come a long way, especially I'm going to give Bungie some serious kudos here. We actually have a long run-up, and other people around the industry will be jealous that we have a line where it says, okay, this thing is done in this days, and then we usually have multiple weeks till we have to be to make sure that our stuff is done. And then we've been getting sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks of time to actually mix the game at the end, which is a lot longer than a lot of people have. So we've learned over the years to try to give us as long of a runway as possible to help us have a successful landing.
I've worked on a lot of small games besides the big games, and one thing I just wanted to say, we collaborate very closely with our collaborators, and the most important thing for me as a content provider is to understand your vision, and the most important thing that you can come to me is to have a cogent vision and really to know what you want, how you want to affect your audience, your players, what you want your game to feel like, the whole entire experience. As a creative artist, I work with kind of a gestalt. I want to have the vision. I want to understand your vision, the big picture, and then we kind of hone in and find the details. So with younger collaborators, that has been always, sometimes really works well. People come with vision that's amazing. Sometimes they want to try things, and that's also a legitimate approach. You want to try this or you want to try that, but you have to understand on a low budget, it's very difficult to kind of try things, throw things at the wall and see what sticks. So then the approach we take is, okay, now let's see at inspirations, at antecedents. Let's see how somebody else did their game and see if this inspires you. So kind of be ready to have that reference pool of references, things that you like, things that you're passionate about, because this will really help your collaborators. And I'm talking right now about casual games, iPhone games. I've scored about 7 of them in the last couple of years. So be ready to kind of give resources to your collaborators, be really open about your ideas, articulate your vision. We want to make you happy. We want to create the most amazing audio music for the game. We want to please you. And come to us with vision, with ideas, with style guides, as we call them, because this really helps the collaboration. And be really open. Like if something changes, tell us. Be really specific. If you need 2 seconds of like respawn of the enemy or spawn of something, tell me I need exactly 2 seconds. You know, don't just tell me give me a stinger, because I can have a stinger anywhere between 2 seconds and 10 seconds. But there was a situation most recently on my latest shooter where I was given super specific instructions, and I was so grateful. Again, specificity really helps me, because I don't throw things at the wall and then have to rework, rewrite, but I just go and I nail it. And on a low budget or no budget, as the case sometimes is, when we invest in the work of our collaborators, it's really important to be super specific, super clear, good vision, good collaborative process, and this makes everybody happy.
Now, just in case people know, Penka is a freelancer, been freelance for about 16 years or so. Jay is an employee of Bungie. Have you found, Penka, that as a freelancer where maybe you're working remotely, maybe you're working on multiple projects, how do you work with a developer to kind of implement what you just talked about? Do you find that a little bit more challenging than obviously if you were in an office with them every day?
Communication is the key. And over the years, I've learned to ask the right questions and really kind of fish out the information I need to get my job done. And I'm just really proactive in my process. Now, I would always ask questions, tell me about your game, tell me about your inspirations, give me visuals, give me prototypes, even if it's like stick figures or blob. In other words, feed as much content to me and as much of your vision with words, keywords, concepts, what your favorite soundtracks are, what you like, because it's important for me to understand your taste. It's important to me to understand what you're passionate about. So essentially, we write rivers of emails. I also work with game developers all over the world, all over the country. So communication to me is vital, and I'm a very open kind of very hands-on collaborator. Yes, and I have been a freelancer for 16 years, and yes, I do juggle multiple projects. And sometimes game development goes on hiatus, and that's very much part of your process, and I have to respect that. So I have to come back 6 months later and sort of refresh and sort of re-energize myself again about your game. And again, the more information you give me, some amazing screenshots or descriptions or briefs, they don't have to be long, but they have to be specific and descriptive, and again, share your vision. And I love it. It's fun.
Yeah, I think I can't emphasize the communication enough. I mean, even though I work at Bungie, it doesn't mean necessarily that everyone tells me all the information that I need to have. So I rely on production. I rely on other people to make sure that they're communicating with the audio team to make sure that we understand what their hopes and dreams and desires are. We have a term that we use that we like to call them ponies. So there's people out there that are creating ponies, and they love their pony. And the fact is, if they don't tell me that their pony exists, then I can't help put a nice saddle on their pony and make it sound good. When we find things really late in the project that somebody has been a pet project of somebody's that's sort of been hiding in the darkness, that's a really hard thing for us to respond to. And unfortunately, it's a characteristic of video games, and not everyone likes to say, hey, I'm making this really cool thing, but I don't want to tell anybody about it yet because I want to get it greenlit, so I need to get it finished until I can actually say, hey, here's a cool thing, we can put it in the game. But we need to know that it's there so that we can actually be able to respond to it. So communication among all the teams is super, super important, whether you're in-house or out-of-house. It's if somebody doesn't tell us what they're hoping for, then we're not going to be able to respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Something further?
No, this is awesome.
In terms of getting some of these things going, a lot of times there's a perception that game audio is, I'll hire somebody, they'll create some WAV files for me, they'll put them on an FTP site, and that's kind of it, I'm done.
No, that's not a thing.
That's not a thing? That's not how it works?
That's not a thing.
What's the importance of some of these? There's been a development in the last few years of these sort of audio development tools, middleware tools. How important are those in creating a modern video game?
They're huge for us. I mean, we've switched over to Wise after 15 years of making Halo in the Bungie engine, or 12 years of making Bungie in the Halo engine. We switched over to Wise in about 4 years ago, and it's a really, really powerful tool, and it's a language that a lot of people can talk about, and it means if I'm going out and I want to hire somebody, if they have Wise experience, that immediately makes them massively more valuable to me than they would be if they didn't know these tools. They're extremely powerful tools that that allow people to be able to implement audio in a great way without needing a whole lot of stuff from the rest of the development team. Like we can plug and play pretty much anything audio-wise. We can plug it into pretty much anywhere in the engine without any trouble whatsoever. And somebody that knows Wise can step right in and do that very same thing. Just ask Rob; he knows because he came in and did that very same thing for us. So you get people. It's an extremely valuable thing for us. In the Halo engine, bringing somebody in to work inside our engine was not a thing that would happen very gracefully. We would probably spend 6 months trying to teach them actually how to put sound in the game, where somebody that knows Wise can be doing it on day 2.
Speaking about my experience in casual games and iPhone games, I would encourage you, if you can afford to work with sound implementer or sound audio guy, definitely it's just worth it in gold, because a professional can elevate your game to a whole new level. And I'm really lucky to work with this professional audio guy who used to work for Sony Online, but now is freelancer. And he gives me the audio brief. He's amazing to work with because he interprets the needs of the game company, the game developers, to me, and kind of gives me additional feedback, additional guidance, and it's just an incredible process. I'm really grateful for that. And he knows WS, he knows every single iPhone engine that is available there, Unity, and he implements my music. And it's a wonderful collaboration, and he's the pro, and he gets hired by people like yourselves, independent game developers on small games, iPhone games, and I would encourage you to pursue that opportunity because it really will elevate the production value of your game, and ultimately you won't have as many bugs. It's a good approach to work with a professional.
Yeah, I can echo that too. I mean, it's become so specialized at the point where we have 3 composers on staff. Those composers write great music. C. Paul Johnson, Michael Salvatore, and Sky Lewin are writing great music for our game, but we have a totally other guy that implements all their stuff. Like who's also has a master's degree in composition. He's not writing music for the game, but boy, is he really sharp at actually putting it in the game. And again, that's a huge skill to have. Having somebody that can really utilize those tools to their fullest and being able to make the music sing in the game is huge.
See, speaking of implementation, I've heard people say implementation is half of game audio. What does that actually mean? Isn't it just when it's time to when this happens, play this WAV file, and then when this?
Go ahead.
All right. For us, it's definitely half. I mean, there's a lot of people who can make great sound effects, but being able to actually make them play back properly in the game is a huge challenge because it's not just saying play this wave, and we start talking about what's the roll off on it? How far are you going to hear it from, and how is that roll off going to happen? Do you want some real time effects that might happen to it, where the further away you might add a little reverb, or you want to do a low pass filter on or a high pass filter, like being able to alter those things depending on where you are in the game. Do you have occlusion obstruction? Do you have occlusion obstruction values that you might want to alter on a per asset basis? We generally tend to bucket those things into larger buckets, but we also can do it all the way down to an individual asset. Can have a different roll off, could have a different reverb, could have a different occlusion obstruction. Can have all these values can be different on a per asset basis if you want. And being able to make all the stuff play nice in the game, that is literally half the battle. Getting the priorities right. I mean, the list goes on and on. Believe it or not, we actually operate, Destiny right now operates within about 40 voices is what we max out at. And a lot of people are like, really, you only use 40 voices? I'm like, yeah, well, if your brain can process more than 40 voices, then you're some kind of superhuman that I have no idea what you can possibly do. So its key thing is getting them to hear the right 40 voices and making sure that those are the 40 voices that you want them to hear, and they're the most important ones. And that's half the trick of being able to make the implementation work well.
The person who implements both music and sound is our best friend. He's absolutely indispensable. And I wanted to say, basically the audio is the emotional experience, and this is how you have to think of it. Audio is really important. It creates that experience, that memorability. I mean, people mention they remember the sound or the music of this or that game, and that's the experience, that's the memory. So you want somebody who is implementing to create that experience. And I, as a composer, I'm grateful because I learned the F-mode and Wise only to the degree that I would understand how my music will be implemented, but I'm not fluent. I'm fluent in what I'm fluent, which is composing, creating the emotional impact, creating themes, creating memorable music. So for me, that to work with a person who really knows what they're doing on the implementing side is absolutely priceless, because they will take my WAV files and whatnot and create the experience for the gamers. and it's an incredibly valuable collaboration again. And I talk very closely with the person who is implementing, and I don't compose even a single note before I have a very clear understanding of exactly how the music is going to be implemented, what are the needs of the game, levels, what's the genre, what's the antecedents, inspirations. Again, very close collaboration and very close feedback loop between all people involved in the pipeline.
Yeah. Is there any other thing that, sort of picking up on that, that would make the process go smoother that, that you will get from the game developer? Obviously, communication is very key. But at what point do you, maybe as a freelancer, get involved? Is there an advantage to being brought in earlier, maybe when it's only at script form, or do you like to be brought in after they've kind of decided what levels they want where, or how collaborative do you get in? It's almost part of the game design document, the laying out of the music.
I've been brought in at all points, from the Kickstarter when the game didn't have a single line of code to midway to late in the game, 3 months out. So the scenarios can vary, and that's normal. I mean, each company has their own process, and we respect that. But again, the most important thing goes back to what I said, understanding the vision of the game makers, understanding the game mechanics, the aesthetics, their inspirations, what they want to feel like or play like. And for me, again, that communication is totally the most important. But it could happen in any time. I've been part of the Kickstarter before they even began, and I've been brought in on a big game. On my big games, I was brought in just like 3 months out. So, and we had 3 months to deliver 2 hours of whatever. But it can happen anytime. But communication is the key.
That's crazy.
Oh, no, 5 months.
3 months out.
5 months for Prince of Persia.
Yeah, I think very similarly for us. I mean, we have a couple beats that we always love to hit. I think the composers tend to get dialed up at a relatively early point before there's a whole lot of code written or there's a whole lot of missions going, to try to create some of the themes, some of the thematic material that are just going to fit sort of the tone of the entire piece. But then we definitely have a pretty regimented thing where once the levels are actually playable and we can actually say, hey, we can play through this section of the game, then composer will sit with, usually it's, CPAW will sit with a level designer, play through the entire mission. They'll talk about what the beats are, how many pieces do we want to have, what sort of is the focus of how this is going to work, where do we want to call out some various activities that are going to happen during the mission. And then he can send that off either to himself or to a couple of other composers and say, have at it, this is the way we want this to go. And at the same time, our implementer, Michael, can actually be able to start creating temp tracks out of previously existing music that says, hey, we're going to try to make this so that it generally works the way we want it to work, and then we can substitute in the final music when it's actually done.
Oh, so you're temping it out with, you're checking the mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can get all the mechanics, we can get all the wiring done along the way, before the piece of music is necessarily even completed, with an eye towards how we know it's going to work at the end of the day. And then once we get through, I'm sure as you get towards the end, you're going to Studio X, you're going to some a studio in LA, and you're recording with an orchestra, and you're saying, okay, sweet, all right, now the music's done, now it's mixed, and so on and so forth. Okay, this piece slots over here, and you can go and you can then slide that stuff into place of the things that we had temped in prior to that point, because we know all the wiring works, and at that point, we're just replacing.
I just wanted to add something. Occasionally, in my experience on both Prince of Persia and small games, the creative vision changes halfway along the way, and that's legitimate, that happens. And then the composer has to roll with the punches, that's the only way. On Prince of Persia, we had a theme early on, like a full year out. Mm-hmm. And then they had a change at the top of the creative leadership. Somebody else came along at Ubisoft Montreal, and basically he said, this theme, no, we need a new theme. Steve Jablonski was the lead composer, the theme composer in Prince of Persia. I was the composer of the in-game music. And actually, I didn't start until a couple of months later because I had to wait for the themes to be approved. But then the main theme changed. The sound remained the same, but the thematic, it was just completely different. It was darker, just different music altogether. And we have to roll with the punches. That's the only way. So Steve composed a second theme, and in the meantime, I was kind of delivering music. So we stayed on track because I really could not afford to fall behind because I had 2 hours of music due. And that's what happened. In small games also, casual games, iPhone games, there could be a change in direction. That's legitimate. You have new ideas or somebody else comes along as part of the team and they bring in new ideas and the composers have to respond. They have to engage and be flexible. So there's a lot of flexibility and, again, communication. Ultimately, we're committed to making you absolutely happy, and then in this creative collaboration, you have to feel completely supported by all of your collaborators and especially by people providing your emotional core, composers, sound designers, sound implementers.
Yeah. So it sounds like between the two of you here, you hit on like two big themes here. One is get the science right, make sure the plumbing is there, so that the ideas that you have and you want to implement actually are tested out and they work, and so you don't run into this technical hiccup that blocks the creative thing you wanted to do. So as far as like laying things out on schedules for the game developers out there, producers who are trying to map these things out, definitely don't assume that you're just going to be getting a lot of sound assets late and throwing them into the game really quickly at the end, which I think we've all seen happen a little bit, because you can really leave a lot of really cool differentiation on the table, because you find yourself, oh gosh, we ship next week and we're sticking audio in.
Yeah, I think for us it's definitely about trying to get the wiring going. Same goes for sound design. I mean, there's some really complicated sound assets that go into a game like Destiny or in Halo or in Prince of Persia or whatever. There's lots of really complicated things that are going to happen, and being able to actually test the pipelines and making sure that all that stuff actually works, even if you're hooking up your own voice saying boom for an explosion, then it just means that I got everything working in the right place. Everything's going to be fine. Once we actually finish the assets, we can just go in and plug that thing in there, and we're good to go. That's a key part of what our creative process is, for sure, is just trying to make sure that, because I want to know if the wiring is not going to work. Because if the wiring is not going to work, invariably it might end up sitting on a coder's plate, or it might end up might be a programming task, it might be a technical art task, it might be any number of things that might need to happen to be able to make me have my hopes and dreams come true. So being able to find that out sooner, even if it's only with temp assets, is a great thing, and it also unblocks us from being able to actually make progress.
Right. So Penka, you started as a composer for more traditional media. What did you find the most different about games? And again, kind of wrapping it up, because I want to leave a little bit of time for a couple questions.
First, I want to say my heart is in games. I've been a professional composer for 25 years, and in Hollywood for 16 years, and in games for about 7 years. And the moment when I began working on games, I felt this happiness and fulfillment, creative fulfillment that all of us strive for all of our lives. So what I found different, what was challenging at first, and you have to also remember my first big game was Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, and my second game was Prince of Persia, so I was learning the whole interactive composing on the fly. And I had amazing bosses at Ubisoft Montreal, the audio leads. They were very generous with guidance, and we wrote rivers of emails back and forth. I was incredibly passionate and open and asking questions and showing super enthusiasm. This was my lucky break. I've been waiting for this lucky break all of my life, the Prince of Persia game. And they understood that, and they really supported that enthusiasm and kind of green, idealistic approach. So they were incredibly specific with their guidance. But I would say learning the interactive composing for me was a challenge, which I had to master, and I did. And for like 6 months, this was the only time in my life when I had one job only. That was the Prince of Persia scoring job, because I understood this is my lucky break. So no distractions, full focus, full commitment. I learned every possible book that was available at the time on interactive composing. I had mentors, and having mentors has been really important for me in my career growth. I reached out with questions to friends, colleagues. I didn't know Brian at the time, but I would have bugged you if I. So the whole idea of I was reinventing myself. I was fully aware this was a bona fide process of reinventing myself as a game composer. It's something I cannot wing. I would not encourage anybody to think that it's easy to kind of switch between genres. You really have to commit to a learning curve, and the learning curve is steep. So I would say just understanding how rigorous the technical aspects are. You just can't compose. You're given the assignment of a 3-minute loop, and you can't compose like 3 minutes and 20 seconds because you'll run out of memory, and there's memory problems. And so the certain rigor of the technical aspects and like really sticking to the brief and really sticking to the requirements was important. I understood that. And then much later, I attended Brian's amazing conference called Game Sound Con. I would encourage all of you to go and check it out, because I learned in those 2 days just tons of information, and just like really committing to a learning curve and to reinventing myself as a game composer, and with the understanding how technically it's different. Otherwise, what is similar between film and games is being able to write thematic music, being able to write emotional music, understanding characters, understanding aesthetics, style, vision of the game. Good music is good music, but there's the technical rigor in games is not to be taken lightly.
I think we are actually at time. I wanted to leave room open for a couple of questions. Anybody have any questions for either Jay, who's been in-house at Bungie for quite a long time, or Penka, who's been a freelancer? Yes.
So you're talking a lot to devs about like programmers and designers about like things, ways that they can do audio people. As audio people, what are things we can do to help get the tools and information that we need that like designers might not know they need to give us? And like, I don't know, does that make any sense? Like, how do we ask for the vision and the specifics of these things if they're not even aware that that's something that can be done, or how do you?
Yeah, I
Repeat
think
the question in your answer.
Yeah, I think the question is how do we as audio guys go about sort of pulling the information out of the team members that we need it from? In our case, we actually go with a very specific thing for every activity in the game. We actually have, well, for us it's OneNote, but it could be any document that you want. We basically send a document with, hey, here's the music bullet points you want, and here's your sound effects bullets that you want. What is it that you want for your mission? So we can actually force them into going through an exercise that says, this is the thing that I'm creating, and these are the encounters that I'm making, and these are the enemies that are going to be there, and this is the, everything from like, hey, there's going to be this really cool door that's going to be here, and this door is going to open, and it's going to need this thing, and I'm going to open it halfway, and then it's going to judder shut, and then so on and so forth. It's getting them to think clearly about what their entire process is for the thing that is they're creating, and committing it to paper. So we have a series of, right now for our next thing that's coming up for Destiny, we have 20 or 30 new activities, and we have a different sheet for every single designer. And we go to those designers and say, populate the sheet with what it is that you want. And if you don't populate the sheet, then you're not going to get stuff. Because this dude over here, if he populates a sheet with lots of cool stuff, then he's going to get he's the squeaky wheel and he gets the grease. And if you don't actually tell me what you want, I can't help you.
Because music is the emotional component of the game, I ask my collaborators to provide emotional words. For instance, I once worked on a Korean game, and it was a very difficult process, also because of the multicultural aspect of it. But they came to us with emotional words, stylistic words. What's the aesthetics? This was one track was called "Corrupted Gods." So the capricious. Basically, we asked them to come up with adjectives that describe the feeling of that particular level theme for the game. It was an RPG. And so emotional words, again, game mechanics, taste. One of the most important things for composers is to understand the taste of their collaborators. Like, talk to me about your favorite games that you grew up with. What do you like? Talk to me about your favorite soundtracks. Because you want to somehow subliminally incorporate the taste of your collaborators, because then they're going to love what you deliver to them. So talk in terms of emotions, in terms of game mechanics, in terms of overall emotional experience and impact. Favorite soundtracks, favorite games, inspiration. Just talk dramatically.
Yeah, I would totally echo that in the sense that I don't think that a lot of people actually know how to talk about audio. That's one of the hardest things that I run into. I do quite a bit of sound design in theater in addition to games, just to keep me out of trouble and make sure that I have no free time in my life. But I find that directors especially, or sometimes people that are collaborating in games, like they don't understand what it is. They know what they like and don't like, but they don't know how to actually describe it. And using emotional terms is a great way to go about that. It's like, how do you want to feel here? Like, what is it that you want to feel? And then I'll figure out how I can make you feel that. But if you say like I need it to be faster or more rhythmic or better melody or something, like they don't understand those words and what the implications that they actually mean. Like I want it to be an A minor. Who's going to tell you that that's just not a thing.
Well, A minor is the saddest of all keys. That's D minor is the saddest of all keys.
But in any case, so it's really about being able to talk cogently with people and saying what is it you want to feel. That's a great way. That's a fantastic way to put it, because I can help with that part. Once you tell me how you want this thing to make you react, then I can work on making you react that way.
Game developers should never feel compelled to speak to musicians in musical terms, because sometimes actually misunderstanding can happen this way. Speak in emotional terms, speak in historical terms, like this game like this. And if the budget is really, really low, when I work on low-budget games, which I've done a lot, casual games, I would always say, send me a YouTube link of what you like. Give me, because we can talk about music in terms...
It's sort of like trying to talk lawyerese to a lawyer, and it's like you're going to get it wrong.
Exactly.
And they're going to misinterpret it.
They should be banned from using musical terms, actually, because they actually don't know what they are. So
So the thing is, sometimes words are words, but you say something, you mean something else, and I misunderstood what you said. So the most important thing is send me a link, YouTube link, iTunes, musical references, and we call them style guides or reference or just inspirations, because I want to hear what you're thinking and what you're saying to me and kind of put together the words and the music that you've given me as a style reference. Because sometimes on that Korean game, there was a huge disconnect between the concept words, as we call them, and the musical references. So my job was to reconcile, okay, oh my God, they want this, but they're saying this, how do I compose this? It was a challenge.
Trust the YouTube link.
Yeah.
The YouTube, the music.
Yeah.
I would trust the music reference more than the concepts, yes.
As a follow-up, could you think of one of the scores you've written in the past and describe it in emotional terms for us, as an example?
Oh, totally. Prince of Persia, dark, epic, heroic, ethnic, because it has to have that component. Very, very kind of muscular action music, powerful, red-blooded, epic, emotional.
Sir.
So I'm going to ask you a question about kind of the previous two sessions from this morning, tying into this, the social media presence, etc. What do you guys think about, is any of the audio essence, like in-game music, thematic music, etc., in your mind, are they things that could be shared as like kind of engagement with the audience before the game's up, in the process of making, like sharing a screenshot? Can you share a snapshot of a snip of the theme music or something? Is that a good idea, or would that be kind of ruining the emotional setup?
To repeat the question for the camera, the question was, can you take, or is it a good idea to take music or sonic elements of a game and maybe use them outside of the game to help socially market the game and share them out? And I don't think you would get a composer in the world who thought that was a bad idea.
No.
We've talked about emotion and supporting the story. Music and sound can also be one of the most iconic pieces of your brand. I mean, think about Mario theme. Think about the Halo theme. These are sounds that become associated with your brand and your product in a very, very deep way. And a good campaign will definitely take advantage of these things.
Yeah, we definitely go about writing thematic material early on. It gets used in our marketing stuff. Any videos that you see that that have come out over the years from Bungie for Halo games or for Destiny games always usually have what we call a mnemonic that you might find if at the tail end of the trailer. You can go to almost any Destiny trailer, hear the same 4-note mnemonic at the end, so that it just is a thing that gets inside your brain, and you want people to associate that sound with what they're associating with your brand.
I have a game coming out on Steam on May 21st. It's called H-Hour, The World's Elite. And I've been giving the developers music for the last 2 years for every single concept presentation, Kickstarter campaign. They really were incredibly grateful, and I'm happy that I'm able to support them. Again, composers are enthusiastic and they're passionate to support their colleagues on independent games, iPhone games. However, on Prince of Persia, and on the big Sony game I just delivered, it was super, super important to keep absolute secret, not tweet about it, not post anything, because there is a culture of secrecy and essentially protecting the trademark until the release. So I was not allowed to, had to be completely, so there's a distinction. And when you work with your people and legal people, of course, it's really important to understand exactly how much tweeting and social media and promotion the composer can do on their own.
Yeah. Definitely. There's, and I had a whole series of questions about this side of the industry, but just, the music that you engage a composer to write, or even the sound design as well for your game, is a tangible asset. And there's lots of cool things you can do with that tangible asset. You talk about licensing it in other media, film trailers, things like that, but definitely as a marketing tool or as additional downloadable content. My kids were really excited about this one game they did where when they do this certain amount of stuff, they unlocked some more music, and that kept them engaged. So think about music in more ways than just supporting the story in a lot of the ways we've been talking about today, but how you can make it as a broader element of your game. Because there's, again, especially in the social media world, the DLC world, the data metrics from the Facebook guy this morning, it's like these are all really things. And music has this ability to tap into parts of your brain that visuals have a much harder time dealing with.
The
And
entire,
so take advantage of it.
the entire soundtrack for this game is going to be DLC downloadable
Yeah.
and given to the Kickstarter backers. So yeah, composers are more than supportive, and they want to see their collaborators thrive and succeed, because that's, I mean, our success rides on it's a function of your success.
I think that's going to be it. I'm sure that people would be willing to continue conversations out in the hallway, but let's go ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.